How often, when you are feeling stressed or bored or overwhelmed, how often do you find yourself scrolling on any number of clothing sites, whether it's ASOS, Urban Outfitters, Vinted, Depop? This scrolling or buying things, adding things to cart, saving for later, these behaviors become something we are doing to regulate our emotions that are being caused by the stress that is going unaddressed in other parts of the system. It's all feeding into each other. And this could be why, on a societal level, our mental health is still getting worse and worse, because all of our problems are being simplified down into either there is something wrong with you medically, or here, go buy some stuff and you'll feel better, instead of dealing with the root cause, whether that's inequality or living under a system that is putting our value only in what we produce, or putting our value in relation to the economy and defining us only in terms of our economic output or what we can produce or what we can buy. In this book he mentions a return to work being framed as a return to health, i.e. if you are healthy enough to work, that's all that matters. This is clearly not true, but this is also why the problems keep getting worse and worse, because if they're only addressed on the surface, you're never getting to the root cause, and there is no need for this capitalist consumerist system to get to the root cause, because as long as you're working, it's fine, it doesn't matter. Why is everyone's mental health so bad? Spoiler alert, it's capitalism. At least that's what we're going to talk about in this video. We're talking about the book Sedated by James Davies. We're talking about why our mental health is so bad, why everyone is miserable, and it boils down to 3 reasons, which we're going to go through. Timestamps, as always, will be in the description. Are we miserable because we're being told our problems can be solved by consumption and by buying things? Are we miserable because the current medical interventions that we have do not get to the root cause? They simplify the problem, or they ignore the problem altogether. In the book, Davies sets out how medicalising our distress separates it from its true cause and gives us temporary solutions which don't get to the root. In the UK, we widely use mental health explanations and interventions as a way of avoiding structural and institutional problems. So if someone is struggling because they're not being paid enough per hour to be able to afford their heating bills, their petrol, or their commute to work, and also to feed their family and their rent, if someone is not being paid enough, I don't think any amount of medical intervention, whether it's antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs or therapy, any of those things are not going to solve the initial problem, which is I am facing a tremendous amount of stress and distress in my daily life because I am not making enough money to be able to support my family or even just support myself. Yes, therapy, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, all of those things are obviously really beneficial, but if you're not ever addressing the root problem, which is we are not getting paid enough to survive in this system, or I'm not getting the support I need from the state because I can't work full time, this system is not helping me, and maybe it's not meant to, right? There's the quote of a point of a system is what it does. So maybe everything is working as intended. It's set up so we are giving our time, our energy, our lives are being extracted for profit. Shareholder profit keeps going up. But why does the minimum wage not go up? All of the money that was made by these big companies during the pandemic, anytime those people at the top get wealthier, it's a transfer of wealth from the workers to these CEOs, to these top people. The system maybe is working as intended. It's not supposed to address the structural or institutional problems that we're facing. It's only supposed to mask the symptoms of stress, anxiety, depression that are being caused by these structural issues which are going unaddressed by the therapy. And you see how then it goes around. This is pervasive. It doesn't just affect us when we start working. This is being set up early, this idea that you as an individual are responsible. If you're depressed or if you're sad, it must be something that you're doing wrong, as opposed to you're dealing with a really difficult set of life circumstances and having a very normal reaction to not being able to afford things, or to just living with this constant stress, rent being so high and all of this stuff. In the book he writes, we subtly socialise teachers and children to think of childhood distress in individualistic and medicalised ways. Escalating exam stress ceases to be a commentary on the harms of, say, target-driven culture, and by extension neoliberal policy reforms, and instead becomes a problem of low resilience to be solved by more mental health training. Rising childhood mental distress does not point to failing and unjust social policies or ongoing austerity, but generates calls for yet more early intervention. If schools and children are being pushed to reach certain targets in their SATs, even 10-year-olds, right? If they're being pushed to achieve certain results, it's a normal response to that to be stressed by that. But instead of looking at, hey, maybe we can do a different system than this system, which is stressing everyone out. Instead, it becomes a problem for the individual and being like, you're not resilient enough. There's something wrong with you. It's pointing away from the system and being like, no, this is your fault. These mental health interventions invariably privilege a common style of mental health ideology and simplistic pragmatism, one that medicalizes, depoliticizes, and often commodifies our emotional distress in ways that neatly fit with the preferences of new capitalism. It becomes a loop, like a snake eating its own tail. You are in this system that is not designed for you. It is designed to maximize profits for someone else. Any distress you feel when living in this system is then treated with mental health interventions that don't always work because they're never addressing the root cause. And so then you're feeling worse, but you're still trapped in the system, so you're looking for more help and you're just going round and round, which brings us to commodification. Commodification in this context simplifies our emotions and turns them into something that can benefit the economy. Can you see how we're now going to talk about consumerism? Commodification is the process of assigning economic value to things not considered in economic terms before. Examples would be turning public spaces like parks or museums into private spaces that charge for entry. We're taking a space that was once public and accessible to all, commodifying it, turning it into something for profit. Another example of this is privatising water, which the UK, specifically England and Wales, is the only country in the world to do. So that's fun. Commodification turns all it comes into contact with into an economic opportunity, including our innermost emotional states. You can see how then it benefits the system we live under to actually have these ineffective mental health interventions, because if our mental health, emotional, social problems go unaddressed and we're still feeling terrible, we are then presented with a very simple solution, which is to buy things to try and make us feel better. And it might temporarily work in the moment, the same way as going to therapy is definitely helpful, right? These things are helpful, but if they're not treating the root cause, it's not really going to work. It's the same as I have been through an addiction and I'm now in recovery, but I tried all sorts of things, whether it was therapy programs or like tracking my intake and how much alcohol I was using. But those things were never addressing the root cause, which is often with addiction, trauma or negative core beliefs. I don't want to like simplify it too much, but in easy terms for this video, that was the cause. But me going to therapy every week, that was maybe helpful. It was helpful to have that safe space, but it wasn't addressing the root cause of my addiction. The same thing is true for this commodification. There was a really interesting quote in this book, a placard from one of the Occupy protests. It was from a NYU doctoral student. His name was Richard, this student. This financial crisis has broken many people down, and that distress is now being capitalized on. Literally, it's being turned into capital. Our pain is being exploited for further economic gain. Capitalism teaches us to view our emotions as something that we can create or regulate through targeted acts of consumption. How often, when you are feeling stressed or bored or overwhelmed, how often do you find yourself scrolling on any number of clothing sites, whether it's ASOS, Urban Outfitters, Vinted, Depop? This scrolling or buying things, adding things to cart, saving for later, these behaviors become something we are doing to regulate our emotions that are being caused by the stress that is going unaddressed in other parts of the system. It's all feeding into each other. Richard continues, when we suffer, we are not encouraged to delve deep and face reality. We don't learn about what is broken in our lives or in our society. Instead, we do what our economy wants. We reach for the endless consumer products that falsely promise a better life for a price. We don't manage our distress through action, but through consumption. This is one reason why our mental health is so bad. If we are distressed, sad, overwhelmed, bored, lonely, those are all feelings that are telling us something either about our innermost emotional states, about where we are in our lives, like if you're feeling bored in your job or if you're feeling like you're called to do something else, that is a signal to act, to do something, to be like, what's happening? What do I need to do different? What can I do here? And I'm not saying this in the individualized way we talked about before, about like, it's your fault, it's your responsibility. No, but generally, when we are distressed or sad, that is a call to examine something in our life and to take action. But instead, what we are encouraged to do is to placate those emotions or to like just paper over them with stuff, buying more stuff, or watching TV. Because if you think about the role of pain in your body, I know the exception would be chronic pain, where you're just constantly in pain and dealing with that. But if we think about pain as a signal to actually help us, I think Philip Yancey has written some books about this. Pain in our body is a signal that something is wrong. When you put your hand on a hot stove and you get burnt, your body will instantly react and you take your hand back. You're like, ow, like that hurt, that's gonna burn me. But people who have something like Hansen's disease or problems with their nerves where they can't feel things, they can end up being really burnt if they put their hand on a hot stove, for example, because they can't feel that it's hot and then they're getting burned. So pain can sometimes serve a purpose. And if we're talking about this in like economic terms, it can provoke us to act. And when we're acting, we're then disrupting the current system. That's not helpful. That's not gonna like keep the money going around. And so what we're sold instead is an easy solution of, here, go buy this stuff, manage your distress through consumption. That's gonna be a whole other video, I think, because I wanna talk more about this pain topic, but this video is supposed to just be like an overview. We're going through the 3 points. Let's keep going and get on to the next section. Now we've talked about medicalisation and commodification. Let's talk about capitalism's catch-22. This book is about the mental health crisis. So Davies does focus on antidepressants as one of the key medical responses that we have to our worsening mental health. Some of what he says about antidepressants is not problematic, but I definitely disagree with it. I myself have never been on them. Some of what he says is clear that he doesn't think that this is a good long-term approach and that maybe it should be reserved as something that people just use short-term. And he has like different studies and things that he cites. They've only been tested for short-term use and yet some people are on them for years. What damage is this doing? Or how is this actually not healthy? Or he does this comparison between people who have the same psychiatric condition. I think the comparison is schizophrenia. People who have long-term been prescribed psychiatric medication for that condition versus people who did not take psychiatric medication. And in terms of long-term outcomes, sometimes the people who weren't on the medication long-term actually did better. So there's some stuff that is not questionable, but like you definitely have to read and make your own mind up about. But he does talk about antidepressants specifically as a simple solution to complex problems. And I certainly feel this because like when I was in my addiction, I was very depressed because I was drinking a lot, and alcohol is a depressant and it does affect your mood. Even if you're only drinking a little bit, it's probably affecting you more than you realize. That's a whole separate topic. I was feeling depressed, but that was because of my circumstances, right? Once my circumstances changed, once I got sober, be more engaged in my community, at the beginning of my sobriety especially, and just doing things differently, managing my emotions better, learning how to be a person again, like once things were changing, I was no longer feeling depressed. Even if I had been prescribed antidepressants, I mean, they wouldn't have done because I was still drinking a lot, but it gives us a simple solution to something that is far more complex. The use of medicalized interventions to obscure complex human and social problems is yet another expression of our cultural inclination to manage distress in politically and economically convenient ways, whether this is through prescribing psychiatric drugs or promoting excessive consumption. People are being asked to manage their pain in ways that first and foremost privilege economic health. Because if you think about it, you go to the doctor, you say, look, I'm really depressed, I'm feeling all these things, like life is really difficult for me at the moment. It's far easier for the doctor to just say, here, take this prescription. And I'm not saying that that won't help you, because it definitely does help people. This is not what I'm saying. We're talking about wider societal problems here. It's far easier for the doctor to give you the antidepressants and be like, here, take this, than it is for them to say, okay, we're gonna sign you up for this group therapy, we're gonna give you this one-to-one therapy, we're gonna give you like a key worker who's gonna go through, you know, maybe you're struggling like with your finances at the moment, we've got someone who can help you manage that and to try and make things easier for you. Those things are more time consuming, but they're also expensive, especially if they're gonna be government funded, because here in the UK, we do have the NHS, so if I go to the doctor, I am not presented with a bill. But obviously those people still need to get paid. You know, I have friends who are doctors, and so the government is funding it, as they should do. But can you see how it's a lot easier to just promote antidepressants as the cure-all for any number of conditions than it is to actually think this person needs social support. They need therapy that will help them unpack whatever beliefs, or that will help them address whatever it is that's been causing them this anxiety or this insomnia or whatever. You would need so much more support from various different people that would be more effective at addressing your deeper problems, but that's going to be really expensive. So instead we're sold a simpler solution alongside this constant like background noise of like, if you buy more you'll feel better, even if it's just temporarily. And like, we can all fall into this trap. I'm certainly trying to unpack it. Antidepressants have thrived not because they have improved the emotional life of the nation, but because they have served as a sticking plaster for deeper maladies caused by structural problems afflicting our mental health sector and wider economy. And you can see the catch-22 come in this quote. We turn behaviours and emotions that might negatively impact the economy into a call for more medical intervention. So if you are feeling very depressed, very overwhelmed, those are negative emotions. How are they going to impact the economy? Well, you may not be able to work because you're feeling so overwhelmed you can't function. That is then an emotion that's turned into a behaviour, you not going to work, that is then negatively impacting the economy because then you're not contributing to the economy, you become economically inactive, which I think is this gross term because it ties our worth only to what we give to the economy. Like, it's saying if you are not valuable to the economy, if you are not working, if you are not buying things, if you are not useful to the economy, you are not useful as a person, which is completely untrue, but this is why I hate this term economically inactive, because it's tying your value to the economy. And just no. Behaviours and feelings that perturb or disrupt the established order should be medicalised and treated, as these can frustrate the economic interests of powerful financial institutions and elites. We turn suffering into a vibrant market opportunity for more consumption. This is what commodification is, like we talked about, and it's feeding into itself. It's saying, okay, you're struggling, let's get you into this loop of, we're not going to address the actual problems, but here's some medication, or here's some like 6-week long therapy, which is still great, it's really valuable, but it may not help you unpack everything you need to unpack in 6 therapy sessions, right? So here's this sort of ineffective, like short-term sticking plaster solution, like they said, and also like go buy some stuff and maybe you'll feel better. This is more beneficial for the overall system than actually helping the individual get to the root of their problem and become happy. Because as well, how are we going to become happy? I mean, we get onto that in the next section of the video. So we've gone through medicalisation, commodification, and the catch-22 of those two feeding into each other. This is what Davies goes into in Sedated, and this is how capitalism has created and is perpetuating our modern mental health crisis. So what is the vision for the future? Like, what is the hope for this? Well, first off, it's about reconnecting with our emotions and seeing them as a catalyst to act, as opposed to just numbing them by watching TV, buying something else, eating something else, ordering takeaway, whatever. Instead of numbing our emotions, we need to feel them. I've actually got a video coming out about how to regulate your emotions if you're dysregulated. Subscribe if you'd like to see that when it comes out. Viewing our emotions as an impetus to change or as a call that something is not right, that's gonna help a bit in this system, but that's not gonna help shift the entire system, right? That's more just about like existing in a way that is prioritizing our mental health and becoming aware of the structures that we live under and being like, oh, okay, I'm constantly being sold this message. We're being told that a return to work means that someone's healthy again, even if they still have all of these problems, or even if they're so tired that when they get home from work, all they can do is sleep and they can't do anything else, right? We're still being told that that person is healthy because they are now economically active. And of course, sarcasm, of course, a person's value is determined on how much they contribute to the economy. But this quote from the book helps give you an idea of how things could be different. In April 2020, the UK economy was experiencing its most significant recession in the history of modern capitalism, the wheels of commerce and community life juddering to a sudden halt. The stats were unprecedented. In 1 month alone in the UK, GDP dropped by 20%, the service sector contracted by a quarter, unemployment rose by 1.5 million, government borrowing topped an extra 100 billion. At the same time, consumer debt in the UK fell by 7.4 billion in April 2020 alone, the largest ever fall recorded by the Bank of England. We all know what happened in April 2020, but can you see, just from this quote, when things had to suddenly change, when the world suddenly became different, more dangerous, consumer debt fell. And all of these other bad things were happening to the economy, but consumer debt, the thing that affects individuals, that fell because people suddenly didn't need to commute. They were maybe working from home. They weren't able to go out in the same way that they normally would and buy things, even if it was just like going to the pub or whatever. They weren't able to go out in the same way. I know some people still did, but like, we're talking about the people who, you know, did the right thing. So during that time, people were spending less. Consumer debt fell by 7.4 billion in this time. People were spending less, and what were they doing instead? I don't want to romanticize this time in any way because I said I had friends who are doctors. This time was truly terrible for them and for so many people. But when I think of what I was doing in April 2020, I remember the weather was beautiful. I was a student, so we were having online Zoom classes, and the rest of the day I was at home with my family. We were all home For the first time ever, my dad used to travel a lot for work. This is a whole other thing, I guess, about the way capitalism damages your health, extracts all of your value, all of your economic value, like takes everything from you. And then when it's done with you, that's it. Like your health becomes unimportant. Like who cares if you have bad health in retirement, as long as you were able to be economically productive during your working life. Like I think it is such a messed up system. But like it was literally the first time in my life that my dad was home for an extended amount of time. The other times that we had been together, the four of us as a family, would be like family holidays for a week or two, right? So it was a different time and there was different priorities. I know not for everyone, but I'm speaking from my experience. I know not for everyone, because if you're still working in the supermarket, or you were a doctor or a nurse or anyone working in a hospital, and if you had relatives who were unwell or friends who were unwell, or you were a carer, like I know everyone had a really different experience of this time, but I'm just saying, me reflecting on that time, it was more about like just being with my family and like being very present as well, being in the moment, because we didn't know what was going to happen. Could do a whole separate video about the capitalist response to the pandemic in general, because it's been quite disturbing to see what happened in April with consumer debt going down and people spending more time at home and not buying so much. That was not beneficial for the economy. We weren't buying so much, so then we were pushed this return to normal probably a lot sooner than we should have done. This had a knock-on effect on everything. That could be a whole separate video. But I just wanted to show like there is another way, and it's not our fault. It's when like the conditions change, like they're saying in April 2020, when the conditions changed, then our behavior changed. So like the system we're living under is dictating the way we're reacting to certain things. And when we're given more time or more space, like working from home, for example, you start to prioritize things differently, or you're sort of a bit outside of the matrix, so you can have this outside view of it and be like, hang on, what do I value? How am I managing my emotional pain? Is it actually helpful for me to keep buying things? Is this helpful? You know, it gives you a bit more space, which is not economically valuable, because you start questioning all of these things. But the book is, as we've been talking about, Sedated. I highly recommend it. Obviously we've been through some points in this video, but there is so much I didn't go into. It's such a rich book. It's very easy to read, but it's jam-packed full of information. It's really engaging. Really interesting book. If what I've said throughout the video has piqued your interest, definitely check the book out. I found it at my local library, so have a look for your library, or you can always submit a request, like email your library and be like, hey, can we get this book in? Because they do listen. Buy a copy and then give it to a friend. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I've been wanting to make it for a while. I hope it has planted some seeds, given you some stuff to think about what we value and how our economy is set up, or how we're sold these simplistic solutions to very complicated problems, or we're being told it's our fault when it's actually like a societal thing. I will leave my consumption video. It's called Why Do We Keep Buying Stuff We Don't Need? It's a bit more of an informal discussion around similar topics from this video. I will also link, when it's done, the How to Rest When You're Dysregulated video that I'm making, because that links nicely to what we've talked about here as well. Thank you so much for watching. God bless, and I will see you in the next one.